At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
You have been well trained, my young apprentice. They will be no match for you.
As one of the best characters in all of Star Wars, as well as my personal favourite, Darth Maul is one of the most famous and legendary Star Wars characters to ever exist. Making his horrifying debut in The Phantom Menace, this Zabrak Dathomiri Knight brother certainly left a mark on everyone's faces, leaving scars and horror as every child and adult walked out of that movie theater of The Phantom Menace thinking how cool Darth Maul actually was, as without him, we would not have the double-bladed lightsaber. Darth Maul is without a doubt one of the most formidable beings in all of Star Wars history, and one of the greatest combatants and force users of the Republic era of the Jedi. However, how powerful is he? In order to fully comprehend this, I've divided it into 3 sections. The first section will be focusing on his combat feats, as well as his lightsaber dueling known feats within combat, as well as in comparison to other combative users. His second one will be his force ability, which will include his speculated full potential, how much of this potential he lost in The Phantom Menace after being bisected by Obi-Wan Kenobi, his force abilities, and how powerful he actually became. And the final category will be focusing on how powerful he is overall in comparison to other force users. But before we get into all the nitty-gritty details about his power, potential, and overall status and scaling as a Force user and combatant, first I want to provide you with a brief explanation on his origin story, and how he was meticulously forged through rage, pain, and suffering into the Sith Lord that we all know and love today. The Zabrak that would one day become Darth Maul was born in 54 BBY. A Force-sensitive male Zabrak Dark Lord of the Sith who lived during the waning years of the Galactic Republic and during the early years of the Empire. Originally a Knight brother born on Dathomir and known only as Maul, the infant Maul was given away by his Knight sister mother to the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, who trained him in the ways of the dark side of the Force as his secret apprentice on a secret Mustafarian training facility, along with the help of a split personality droid. Maul became a master of lightsaber combat and learned various Sith techniques. Though well trained in the ways of the Sith and a Sith assassin rather than a full apprentice, Maul was technically a violation of the rule of 2, because his own master was at the time apprenticed to another, the Moon's Sith Lord Darth Plagueis. Plagueis, however, was fully aware of Maul's existence and continuously supported Sidious's decision to train him. The primary reason for Plagueis' support, despite the violation of the rule of 2, was that Maul was trained to be expendable. As an assassin, he could perform high-priority boots-on-the-ground missions for the Sith while not exposing Sidious or Plagueis' secret identity should he ever fail to complete his assassinations or missions. In 33 BBY, Sidious gave Maul his first mission, to put the criminal organization known as Black Sun in disarray. Maul carried out this first task perfectly, dealing with the group a grievous blow. Maul played an instrumental role in the invasion of the planet Naboo in 32 BBY. The crisis engineered by Darth Sidious, who secretly lived a double life as Senator Palpatine of Naboo to have Supreme Chancellor Finis Valorum removed from office, allowing Sidious to take his place and set the stages for a government ruled by the Sith into motion. After Padme Amidala, the Queen of the Naboo, escaped the blockade, Maul was dispatched to follow her, to force her to sign a treaty that would make the occupation via the Trade Federation of Naboo legal. He found her on Tatooine, where he had a short but intense duel with the Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, revealing the existence of the Order of the Sith Lords to the Jedi after almost a millennium of secrecy. The Jedi, who had thought the Sith extinct, would later dismiss this, believing it was just a mere dark acolyte. Later, Maul was sent to Naboo, where he fought Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi. Though through difficulties he killed the Jedi Master, Maul underestimated Kenobi's skill and was severed in half at the waist by the Padawan. Sidious, however, would quickly replace Maul with another powerful apprentice, the late Jinn's former master, Count Dooku, who had fallen to the dark side and whom Sidious had dubbed Darth Tyrannus. Through his intense rage, Maul was able to survive and escape to the junk fields of Lotho Minor, where he spent the next 12 years of his life with little to no memory of his former self, dabbling in the misery of his rage. Maul kept himself mobile by manifesting a spider-like lower half, feeding off of the rodents while his mental equilibrium slowly became undone, eventually reducing him to screaming madness. Although Darth Sidious and the Jedi Order were unaware of Maul's continued existence, the Night Sister Mother Talzin continued to keep an eye on Maul. In 20 BBY, 3 years into the Clone Wars, Towson sent Maul's brother, the Sith Lord Savage Opress, the ousted apprentice of Maul's Sith successor Dooku, on a quest to find the fractured man who dwelled in the depths of Lotho Minor, believing that it was time to finally bring the Zabrak Night Brother back into the limelight. Savage successfully retrieved his brother and brought him back to Dathomir just after the virtual extinction of the Night Sister species. On Dathomir, he underwent physical and mental reconstruction by Towson's dark magics. Rehabilitated mentally and physically through prosthetic legs, Maul swore to re-establish his place in galactic history, starting with taking vengeance on Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi who was now a knight, who had officially gotten onto his absolute death list due to the fact that he had maimed him and bisected him all those years ago. Maul and Opress caught the attention of the Jedi Order by slaughtering hundreds of innocents on the planet Raydonia in a successful attempt to coax Kenobi into the light. Maul tortured Kenobi through the arrival of an unexpected ally. The Night Sister Asajj Ventress gave Kenobi the time he needed to escape. Maul and Opress soon cut a bloody swath across the Outer Ring, catching the attention of the Republic and the Jedi. On one occasion, Maul rallied the Mohonji clans against the Rim Mining Company, with Maul and his brother then unsuccessfully trying to recruit a group of Weequay pirates from the Ornaka gang to cause a plan which was thwarted and nearly ended in the Night Brothers' deaths following the arrival of Kenobi and Adi Gallia. Although Adi Gallia was killed, Maul and his brother were found unconscious later by the Mandalorian cult the Death Watch, with their leader, Pre Vizsla, and his lieutenant Bo-Katan Kryze, after having their ship damaged by Kenobi. The two conspired to conquer Mandalore and establish a criminal empire and underworld, enlisting the aid of the Hutt Cartel, Black Sun, and the Pike Syndicate, the three most influential crime families in the history of the galaxy. When the new Mandalorian state on Mandalore was conquered by the new Shadow Collective, Vizsla imprisoned Maul and Opress, no longer having any use for them. After escaping imprisonment, Raw retaliated by dueling and finally decapitating Vizsla, declaring himself the ruler of Deathwatch and therefore of Mandalore. Maul finished his revenge on Kenobi by killing his former lover, ousted Mandalorian Duchess Satine Kryze, sister of Bo-Katan. However, his actions drew the attention of his former master, Darth Sidious, who killed Opress and kidnapped Maul for his own purposes. However, Maul managed to escape from Sidious with the aid of his followers. However, later, unbeknownst to Maul, Sidious and Count Dooku had let Maul escape as they believed that Maul could use them to lead them to Mother Tolson. Shortly after escaping Maul's Shadow Collective, he engaged in a series of battles against the Separatists. After several defeats, Maul, with the aid of the Night Brothers and Towson, was able to capture both Count Dooku and General Grievous on Ord Mantell. After escaping from a Jedi strike force, Maul sets off to Dathomir, where he would sacrifice Dooku to Mother Towson, revitalizing her, thus bringing the Dathomirian witch back to her full power. However, Dooku had released Grievous, who would bring Darth Sidious to Dathomir, in order to finish off the witch once and for all. While Towson utilized her magic to attack Dooku, Sidious and Grievous arrived. Towson and Maul were overwhelmed, and Maul was dragged away from the battle by his Mandalorians, while Grievous stabbed Towson with the lightsabers, ending the Dathomirian witch once and for all. Sometime afterward, Maul appears to have died. He was supposedly resurrected in 0 BBY by 3 prophets of the dark side, for the purpose of presenting a worthier successor to Darth Sidious than his current apprentice, Darth Vader. A little fun fact, the prophets of the dark side were an ancient dark side cult founded by the Bay Knight Sith Lord Darth Millennium. A showdown was then staged between Vader and Maul on Kalakar 6, and the two Sith Lords fought to see who would rule the galaxy alongside Palpatine. Maul came extremely close to victory, only to be slain by Vader, whose destiny was not yet fulfilled. However, some years after the Battle of Endor, Maul's remains were discovered by the Iridonian scientist Del Kumpf, who maintained the former Sith Lord's brain within a Bacta tank. Kumpf was able to connect Maul's consciousness to a solid-state hologram program that developed an apparition of the Zabrak warrior. Upon the intervention of Luke Skywalker, however, Maul was removed from the galaxy for good.
A saber staff, the weapon of Exar Kun. Did he construct that?
The prototype was 2 lightsabers he had wielded pommel to pommel in imitation of the Iridonian Jaboka. I furnished the knowledge that allowed him to improve on the original design and construct the one he is using.
It strikes me as unnecessary, but I won't deny his mastery of the Jarkai technique. Niemann and Teres Kassi will never substitute for Dun Much, but I appreciate that you have trained him to be a fighting machine rather than a true apprentice.
In the early stages of his training, being personally tutored and trained by Darth Sidious, one of the greatest lightsaber duelists across all of galactic history, and a rival to notable duelists such as Malgus, Bane, and even Darth Vader. He trained relentlessly, Darth Maul proving to be a very talented and naturally gifted lightsaber duelist, quickly becoming capable enough to impress even Darth Plagueis with his abilities, with Darth Plagueis being so formidable in lightsaber combat. His master Tenebris regarded him as a master of the technique, even though Plagueis personally believed that the Sith had grown beyond the need of lightsabers, much like his apprentice Sidious. By the time Maul became a true apprentice of Sidious, he was incredibly skilled in lightsaber combat, among the greatest duelists in the history of the Sith Order, and especially in the Bainite Sith, capable of easily massacring dozens of enemies and overpowering the most seasoned Jedi Masters. At the age of 17, he came incredibly close to besting even his own master in Darth Sidious during his test on Hypori, despite a long month of starvation, fatigue, and pain, while Sidious was in his peak condition at this point. By 32 BBY, Sidious sincerely viewed his apprentice's combat skills as being virtually unrivaled by any Jedi, with the exception perhaps being Grandmaster Yoda and Master of the Order Mace Windu. Once he had been rehabilitated, Maul's fighting ability appeared to have been undiminished, even after his long hiatus on Lothar Minor, as he was able to best Obi-Wan Kenobi and putting his brother Savage Opress in his place quite effortlessly, with as much discipline as he could muster. With his training focusing intensively on learning the Juya form variant of Form 7 from Sidious, Maul's inner aggression served to amplify his usage of the form, and applying it to any duel and battle he fought in, drawing heavily on virile emotions and the dark side to gain the ability to overwhelm a singular opponent with sheer tenacity and brute force, very similar to Darth Malgus and Vader, although he was much less skilled and calculating with regards to dueling ability than these latter two Sith Lords. However, while he was already very proficient in Juya, and being a lightsaber specialist good at utilizing his force powers together with his acrobatics, fighting style, allowing for him more free-flowing fight. His use of the style was hampered by his great devotion to Form 7's physical focus, desiring a purely physical victory over his opponents, rather than using the higher Sith tradition of Dune Mok. The Dune Mok tactic was employed heavily by Dooku, with Dooku finding great success in his duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis, being able to quite easily, by exploiting Obi-Wan Kenobi's emotional connection to Dooku, absolutely dominate Obi-Wan during that duel. As you could clearly see, Dooku was not on the back pedal the entire time and completely in control. However, by the time of his revival at the Clone Wars, Maul had outgrown this and fully mastered the form, which made him able to overwhelm even the defenses of a master of Surisu such as Obi-Wan Kenobi and many of their altercations. With Obi-Wan Kenobi being so proficient in lightsaber combat, Mace Windu regarded Darth Maul as the master of Juya, and regarded Kenobi as the master of Surisu. Maul was so skilled that he was even able to match his master Darth Sidious. While Darth Sidious's main form was actually Nightman and not Juya, his mastery of Juya was exceptional, with him using Juya in order to stave off the attacks of Grandmaster Yoda. While I am nowhere comparing Darth Maul's dueling skills to Yoda, it is a notable point to bring up nevertheless. There are also a numerous amount of statements from various sources, such as official Lucasfilm sources and various others, that describe Maul's skill and combat ability, which we will put up on the screen now. Of course, we cannot include all of them as these statements number in the hundreds to thousands, but I will include the ones that I found the most captivating and the most interesting. Your skills as a sword master are peerless. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi's excellent use of Form 4's acrobatic maneuvers, a little more than delaying tactics against the Form 7 skills of Darth Maul. With his double-bladed lightsaber, Maul is equal to two Jedi who are unprepared for his powers. Even though he desired a victory purely from superior skill and combative ability, Maul had achieved Dun Mok in a miniaturized level as he separated Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo, silently taunting the Jedi Master, preying on the Padawan's sense of helplessness and feeding off of his anger. After being rehabilitated on Dathomir, Maul employed Dun Mok during his rematch with Kenobi above Rhydodia, as he taunted Jedi Master Jun or Mohonji, making him choose between facing Maul and saving Mohonji from imminent destruction. I would like to note one thing quickly here about the duel in Naboo, and something that a lot of people get wrong with Darth Maul. Many people assume that Darth Maul was the clear superior to Qui-Gon due to the fact he was able to outmaneuver him. This is actually not the case. Qui-Gon Jinn was quite skilled and incredibly powerful, being a rival to the upper echelon members of the Jedi High Council, with many holding him in the same regard as notable duelists and combatants such as Plo Koon or Kit Fisto. Plo Koon explicitly being someone that Darth Maul stated on numerous occasions was someone he did not want to tangle with anytime soon. There is also a quote from the Phantom Menace novelization in the Phantom Menace Visual Dictionary that shows that Darth Maul was utilizing his power on the dark side of the Force in order to suppress Qui-Gon's abilities, therefore weakening the Jedi where he was getting and gorging upon Obi-Wan Kenobi's fear and the Jedi tiring, growing more powerful in the process. In order to grasp Juya, Maul would naturally have had to master many forms of lightsaber combat itself. He had superb skills in Form 6, Nightmare, allowing him to skillfully incorporate various force powers into his dueling style, one of which we can see in the Clone Wars. After the death of Adi Gallia at the hand of Savage Opress, we can see Obi-Wan fighting at what, in my opinion, is his peak dueling capability, dueling both Zabrak brothers in Maul and Savage simultaneously, eventually severing Savage's right arm. In this duel, however, after Savage has been severed, we can see that a certain rage boost goes over Maul. Maul often likes playing with his food and does this with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan many times, despite being a superior combatant. He sees in this moment that the time for playing games is over and his brother is grievously injured. So what he does is he effortlessly smashes Kenobi aside with a Force push, very similar to what Yoda did to Sidious in Revenge of the Sith, meaning that Maul's Force push would rival and be extremely powerful, not rivaling Yoda's or Sidious's, but would be at least up there with beings such as Count Dooku. It has also been revealed that Maul had a natural force potential that was above Dooku, with my opinion being he had a very high midichlorian count, but we'll get to that in the force power section. Maul was extremely powerful. Jedi Battlemaster Sindralik believes that at least a decade of study was required to achieve mastery of Form 6. Maul did not seriously begin his lightsaber training until he was around 15, which would suggest that he had wielded Nightman as well as Juya at an astonishing rate. It also shown proficiency in Form 4, Ataru, as shown when dispatching a Trandoshan under Jabba's employ in his escape from Coghive 7, and his specialization of acrobatics may come under Form 4 training. This fighting style, along with Nightman, would enable him to overcome multiple opponents at once, as displayed many times, including his duel in the Phantom Menace. Maul apparently had received various levels of training in Form 2 Makashi, that was sufficient enough for Sidious to note the superb elegance and precision in the Zabrak's dueling ability. However, his skill in this form was nowhere close to Count Dooku, as Count Dooku was regarded as the greatest practitioner of the form of all time. Even Dasha Asant could not help but notice the precision of his movements and the elegant way his blade was pronounced. He was capable of employing some one-handed strikes with a single blade. His saber staff was left, and throughout the Clone Wars, a function of Form 2. Despite aggression and offense being his prominent trait, Maul was also highly capable of applying defensive maneuvers and measures in combat, who would have been considerably adept at Form 3 Sarisu and Form 5 Shien, displaying the ability to skillfully deflect or redirect incoming blaster fire with ease, whether with a saber staff or a single-bladed lightsaber, although his skill with this ability was greatly increased with a saber staff. He was even strong and skilled enough to defend himself off the laser blast of a Jedi starfighter. In one instance, Maul utilized a reverse Shien grip to effectively block and then counterattack Obi-Wan Kenobi. He later assumed a Sarisu opening stance to begin his and Savage Opress's duel with Darth Sidious, likely anticipating an attack from the reigning Dark Lord being very offensive, as he was the one who was the first tutor of his Sith master all those years ago. When fighting multiple opponents simultaneously, Maul extended the second blade of his lightsaber to form a saber staff, the ancient weapon forged by fallen Jedi Exar Kun over 3,000 years prior, displaying a superb skill and mastery with the weapon. As most of the era's Jedi had never faced such a weapon in combat before, or had been trained to master one, or a practitioner skilled in its use, Maul sometimes used the relative novelty of his weapon's second blade to catch his opponents by surprise. Maul constructed the weapon himself, using ancient plans stored in one of the holocrons that the Sith still possessed by the time of the Phantom Menace. He had based his lightsaber design upon that of Darth Xana's weapon, with Darth Xana being the apprentice of Darth Bane and basically the daughter of the Rule of Two, which in turn had been a development on Exar Kun's original design. It is likely that the choice also came from his species' penchant for the Zaboka, a similar weapon in Night Sister culture. His mastery of the saber staff was so complete and intricate, He could spin it with just one hand without injuring himself, a trick he may well have learned from Darth Sidious. Maul was also equally capable of adapting his dueling style with his tactical know-how, which allowed him to outmaneuver his opponents. He could not defeat through his martial prowess alone and beat such enemies to submission. For example, he had studied the plasma refinery complex in order to prepare for the fight with Jin and Kenobi. He then decided to lure the Jedi to the location, separate them, and use the laser gates to further secure his victory. This would imply an unusual display of Sokan, using the terrains to an advantage in lightsaber combat. Maul showed a fair amount of skill at applying mounted lightsaber combat, although he rarely employed it. All of the known examples of involving him riding a speeder against one or more opponent consist of 2 Black Sun sentries, a lone Bartuk assassin, a non-Bundara, CSF officers, and a portion of Boss Ganan Gunray's army, at which point he was able to often wing or at least engage for a fair share of time. Maul had received extensive training in Jar Kai, and quickly developed sufficient skill that even Darth Plagueis openly acknowledged him as being a master of the art, with Darth Plagueis being no pushover in dueling either. Although Maul rarely applied it, having come to view his dual-blade combat as predictable, his mastery of it, having completed his training under Sidious, had greatly grown. His skills were displayed explicitly when he and Savage forced Sidious to draw both of his blades for the very first time, and presumably the last time. He and his brother fought considerably well against Sidious, seeing how the Jedi High Council members were completely dispatched by Sidious effortlessly, with only Mace Windu being able to survive, proving Maul's superiority over the Jedi High Council members. They evened much of the fight, but were eventually separated. Even alone, however, Maul proved a difficult challenge to Sidious when amplified by Savage's death, taking up both his lightsaber and the darksaber of Tar Vizsla and then Pre-Vizsla against his former master, who was also wielding dual blades. Maul displayed such mastery over Jar Kai, he was able to almost fight on par with Sidious in this moment, matching him blow to blow and kick for kick. He pressured Sidious into a blade lock, which, even if only for a brief moment, forced the Elder Sith onto his back foot. However, Maul was ultimately bested by his former master, who was eventually able to overwhelm him and force Maul's lightsabers apart, once the hilts were within close proximity to Sidious's blades. Regardless, it must be noted that Maul put up a far more ferocious fight than Savage against Sidious, as he did manage to avoid being killed by his own blades when the Dark Lord pushed him back onto the blade lock. Maul's proficiency in lightsaber combat was shown later when his resurrected form was pitted against his successor, Darth Vader, on Calicar 6. I would like to note here that Darth Vader, in my opinion, is one of the greatest lightsaber duelists to have ever existed. It is, in my personal opinion, that Darth Vader's skill in lightsaber combat at its best surpassed his master in Sidious, and may have even surpassed that of Yoda, in my opinion rivaling that of Grandmaster Yoda, Darth Krayt, and Exar Kun. The 3 prophets of the dark side observed that Maul and Vader appeared evenly matched in terms of skill, but Maul bypassed Vader's defenses, punching, kicking, and even wounding him in various places, whereas Vader could only keep up with the Zabrak. Once Vader cut off the saber shaft, Maul used the still functioning components to quickly gain the upper hand over the Sith Lord. While Vader had faced highly skilled dual-bladed fighters in the past, these experiences did apparently not prepare him for a confrontation with one of Maul's caliber. In the end, Maul was proven to be the superior swordsman at this moment, as well as the superior martial artist, and Vader only emerged alive while playing a risky maneuver in order to deal Maul a critical blow, impaling himself in order to impale the Sith Zabrak simultaneously. Maul was also extremely skilled in hand-to-hand combat, and was highly skillful and masterful in the fighting style of Teräs Käsi. Teräs Käsi was explicitly forged by ancient beings in order to combat Force users, with the idea being that bounty hunters would learn it in order to combat against Jedi or Sith, along with other forms of deadly martial arts which he had learned from Sidious in his time in the Orsis Academy, the latter tutelage in which he had a master fighter at the age 13. He displayed outstanding skill in combining unarmed combat prowess with his lightsaber sequence, as shown repeatedly by how he managed to easily hit his opponents while in rage and close combat, even if they were expert duelists. This could also be applied with Taru, allowing him to use his whole body as a weapon, with him even landing a kick on Darth Sidious that forced him back. Using his hand-to-hand combat, he easily outmatched Pre-Vizsla, who was a Mandalorian who had been shown in hand-to-hand combat to be able to match Jedi. Even when he was armed without needing his lightsaber, Maul was able to overcome Vizsla, proving his mastery in hand-to-hand combat over a variety of other beings in the lore. Okay, I can already tell this is going to be a debatable subject. Midichlorians are one of the most heavily controversial and hated aspects about the prequels, with many of them seeing them as needlessly complicated, and George Lucas is trying to introduce something in that has no impact on the story whatsoever. This is not entirely true. It is my personal opinion that midichlorians are amazing, as they help me in various times with debates, but they are also quite useful at quantifying someone's potential in power and how powerful someone could have become if they had reached their true potential. But first, let's establish what midichlorians is before we get into the definition and nitty-gritty of Darth Maul's power. Midichlorians are intelligent microscopic life forms that live symbiotically inside the cells of all living things. When present in sufficient numbers, they could allow their host to detect and persuade his energy field known as the Force. Midichlorians were linked to the potential in the Force, ranging from a normal human levels of 2,500 per cell to the much higher levels of that of a Jedi, with normal Jedi Knights being around 10,000 midichlorians per cell, with the lowest initiates having a midichlorian count of around 6,000. The highest known midichlorian count in all of history, with over 20,000 per cell, and roughly around 27 to 40,000, belonged to Jedi Anakin Skywalker, who was believed to have been conceived by the midichlorians in the wellspring of life itself. Midichlorian counts were measured through a blood test. The Jedi used this method to locate Force-sensitive children before their order was purged by the Galactic Empire. With the rise of the Empire, research into Jedi and the Force was banned, and though midichlorians continued to be tested for sometimes by the Empire itself to root out hidden Jedi and other Force-sensitives, knowledge of them was diminished, and inquiries to them were only branded as illegal medical research. For a comparison, I'll give you some other midichlorian counts. For example, a being like Mace Windu, who's one of the most powerful Jedi of all time, would have a midichlorian count of around 16,000, whereas Exar Kun, one of the most powerful Sith of all time, would fall around 19,000. The Skywalkers, however, such as Luke, Leia, Kaidos, and Jaina, would all fall around 23 to 25,000, with Luke being the most powerful, likely falling at around 25,000 with his sister Leia. However, on the dark side of the spectrum, things are different. Darth Krayt, one of the most formidable Sith Lords of all time, had a midichlorian count of around 21,000, whereas Sidious had a count of around 20,000. On the complete other end of the paradox, we have Darth Vitiate, who in my opinion is the most powerful Sith Lord to have ever existed, and the second most powerful mortal Force user behind Grand Master Luke Skywalker. Vitiate had a midichlorian count of roughly 25,000, with some speculating it could be even higher than Luke's potential and could rival Anakin's potential. Regardless of this, we need to do various things in order to quantify Maul's power with regards to midichlorians. First, we need to estimate how much Force potential Darth Maul lost on Naboo to Obi-Wan Kenobi during their duel. Let's not forget that Maul was bisected. When someone is bisected, they lose a great amount of their physical potential within the Force. Maul was later revitalized by Mother Talzin, although this did not return and resuscitate his Force potential. This merely returned his physical body to a status of supreme power. However, he needed to adjust to his metal legs, which were not fit to his fiber being. Just one thing I would like to clarify is the fact that midichlorians are not inductive of one's power. Just because you have a higher midichlorian count does not mean that you will be more powerful than, let's say, the person next to you with a lesser midichlorian count. It basically illustrates the power level that you could achieve. For example, Anakin Skywalker had the potential to be the most powerful Force user in all of galactic history in the past, present, and future, but he never achieved this, due to being claimed by the fiery mercilessness of the fiery rivers on Mustafar, and being severed all his limbs by Obi-Wan Kenobi on that fateful duel on Mustafar. Darth Vader has been confirmed in normal senses and numerous times by George Lucas himself as having double the Emperor's potential, with Emperor Palpatine having a potential of around 20,000 midichlorians, with his upper limit being roughly around 21,000, with some saying Palpatine had a higher potential than even Yoda. Palpatine was immensely powerful, and in Legends he was capable of rending enormous storms of pure dark-side energy that could shape the fabric of the multiverse themselves, with Palpatine being exceptionally powerful and a rival to other famous and powerful Sith Lords, such as Valkorion, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Krayt, who are among the most powerful Sith Lords to have ever existed. In order to put this in a 1-to-1 ratio, let's examine how much potential Anakin lost on Mustafar. Anakin was burnt by the fires of Mustafar quite severely, and was speculated at being only 80% of the Emperor's power. However, if he had not have been burnt and been able to reach his true potential, he would have been about double. So Anakin's midichlorian count would be around 40,000, perhaps even higher, around the level of the ones of Mortis, if the ones of Mortis even had a midichlorian count at all, as they were empowered by Force nexuses that made them supernatural entities and basically gods of the Force, although they were only distantly related to the ancient race of beings known as the Celestials. They still counted as immensely powerful individuals. Another thing I would like to note is that Darth Maul was basically bisected, losing about half of his potential, so we compare Maul and Vader. At the time of the Clone Wars, Maul's Force potential was cut in half. Miraculously, however, Maul was able to revitalize himself and become more powerful than he was as a Padawan by the end of the Clone Wars. As a Padawan, he was already capable of taking on seasoned Jedi Masters like Qui-Gon Jinn and their Padawans. A Padawan who was explicitly stated to be ready to be a Jedi Knight at that time in Obi-Wan Kenobi. But what would happen if Darth Maul had not been cut in half? Let's explore this briefly. Darth Maul's full potential is currently unknown, however through various sources and as well as various statements, as well as speculation, we can estimate how much potential Maul actually had. Let's put it in this way. Darth Maul is exceptionally powerful and was capable of matching Obi-Wan Kenobi's Force push, effortlessly breaking through his Force shield. Obi-Wan Kenobi was capable of matching the power of Nightfall Darth Vader, although at this point Vader was exceptionally conflicted after slaughtering the Separatist leaders and after accidentally killing Padme through the power of the dark side, which he did not intend to do, so was very emotionally conflicted. So it is my personal opinion that Maul had a very similar potential to the upper echelon members of that generation. We know that Dooku's potential was around 14,000, as Dooku was the most powerful student of his generation. Mace Windu was around 16,000, Plagueis around 17,000, and Grandmaster Yoda a bit over 18,000, an astonishingly high number. It is my personal opinion that Maul was around this 18,000 estimate, being higher than Plagueis, Dooku, and Mace Windu. And that Maul, if he had have reached his full potential, would have been a rival to Grandmaster Yoda if he had have been allowed and stayed with his dark side studies, as he was mainly combat-oriented and not overall entranced with the mysticism of the Force. Darth Maul certainly had a high potential, nowhere near that of Darth Vader, or Vitiate, or Kaitis. However, it was still incredibly noteworthy. Darth Maul is an incredibly powerful being, among the most powerful of the Republic era of the Jedi, capable of taking on multiple Jedi Masters simultaneously. I do personally not believe he was superior to Dooku or Mace Windu, and I would put his most powerful rival being at Obi-Wan Kenobi. And at the time of the Clone Wars, I would even say that Maul was superior to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hatred is a hard thing to kill.
From the day that Darth Maul was born, his mother Kinsa felt that the Force was unusually strong with him. Even Darth Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith who had a midichlorian count almost unrivaled in his generation, was impressed by the infant's strength in the Force enough that he chose to keep him as an apprentice. Trained under Darth Sidious himself relentlessly, Maul honed his abilities furiously and became a very powerful Force adept, and undoubtedly one of the most powerful of the Republic era of the Jedi. However, while Sidious acknowledged Maul's strength, he underestimated just how strong Maul really was. It was only after 12 years after Naboo that Sidious received news of Maul's remarkable survival, which was enabled by Maul's strength in the dark side, which was believed to have been strong enough to keep him alive, despite his immense bisection, due to his immense rage and hatred augmenting his own power in the dark side. Kenobi acknowledged that Maul's knowledge and power of the dark side was great enough to have allowed him to survive his defeat, and Maul believed that it was under training he received from Sidious that allowed him to remain alive. Maul was acknowledged for having become even more powerful in the Force after his resurrection by all of his enemies, and even Darth Sidious, who was very prideful, was immensely impressed enough that he believed that with the level of increase Maul required, which had continued to grow, his former apprentice's power may eventually reach levels that rivaled his own if left unchecked. Maul was highly proficient in many forms of telekinesis, capable of combining Force grip and Force choke together with devastating effect, as shown by how he easily broke Hath Mak'gor in his interrogation, and was able to activate a set of door controls behind him with a flung piece of wrecked droideka during his duel on Naboo. When he felt necessary, he could telekinetically pull weapons away from multiple opponents simultaneously before finishing them off with his lightsaber, like blasters. After his resurrection during the Clone Wars, Maul's telekinetic prowess continued to grow to a considerable margin, capable of performing delicate and remarkable feats such as pulling a section of a wall off of Morjun upon his pursuers, pulling a several-ton Eta-class shuttle off of the hill to trap Kenobi and Hondo Ohnaka's pirate gang, a feat we have seen similar to the likes of Mace Windu, who was able to manipulate and effortlessly push off an AT-TE walker off the side of a cliff, which remarked that Maul's power in the Force at this time could be quite equivalent to Windu's, if not slightly less. He was able to subtly activate the control panel on his brother's carbonite block in order to simultaneously free and allow a press to impale Jedi Master Salmara in the back, as well as even force-pushing Sidious himself to a wall during their duel when he was off guard. Maul became more proficient with Force Choke, to the point he was able of seamlessly choking his foes while engaged in lightsaber combat, and even used it in conjunction with telekinesis, with his proficiency allowing him to blast Obi-Wan Kenobi away at one point, as well as choke him to unconsciousness when he was dizzy, despite Kenobi's considerable strength in the Force itself. He also easily choked a Feline without even looking, and brutally twisted his head 180 degrees. Maul was able to keep Duchess Satine Kryze in a Force choke while not even looking, and pulled her over to the range of his Darksaber to kill her, which was the Draw Closer maneuver, a 9-man technique enabling one to use the Force to bring an opponent within saber range. Maul was also able to strop Tristan's heart at a level that slowly killed him, the like of which we have only seen from Darth Bane, although Darth Bane's level of power in this ability was far superior to Maul. He also became considerably adept at Force Crush, perfecting it to the combination of it and telekinesis. He had one considerable amount of skill with the saber throw technique to use to kill a Jedi Master on various occasions. Another thing I would like to note is that Maul in Legends has access to a variety of other abilities, including his Force abilities and hand-to-hand combat capabilities, including one-punching a Wampa to absolute death, killing the enormous beast that took Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back with his lightsaber just to kill, not to mention Maul was unarmed. Speaking of that, the Yuzong Vong in Star Wars Legends are some of the most naturally violent and powerful species in galactic history, and Maul was able to brutally attack one and kill it, killing it while unarmed, whereas the Yuzong Vong warrior had armor on and was armed. Another one, which in my personal opinion is his most crazy ability in Star Wars Legends, is the fact Darth Maul is capable of using Force Lightning. I know you may think I'm crazy, and when I first heard this, I did too. I recently learned that in the Phantom Menace game, Darth Maul utilizes red Force Lightning on Obi-Wan Kenobi briefly. His Force Lightning is red. While this is commonly associated with the most powerful variation of Force Lightning, in my personal opinion, it is not the most powerful in this case, as many beings such as Darth Malgus and Darth Starkiller were capable of utilizing Force Lightning in an incredibly blue color. This blue color was augmented by their hatred and rage, and Darth Maul is possibly the most hatred and rage-amped character in all of Star Wars, with his only rival being Vader and Malgus. So his power would likely stem into red Force Lightning to express his hatred and rage. Occasionally, given his training in Nightmare, Maul would add Force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences. He wouldn't hesitate to use a Force Push or Force Grip on foes such as Obi-Wan Kenobi if given the chance. Another example was his duel with Dashar Sant. Maul was proficient in the usage of Force Speed, allowing him to move with blinding momentum. In fact, he could run up to 30 meters per second. His speed was such that even Darth Plagueis himself was astounded by it when he observed Maul during one of the latter's training sessions on Mustafar. With Plagueis being so fast, he was able to effortlessly shatter the chest plates of various assassins known as the Maladi Assassins, some of the most deadly assassins in the galaxy, when they staged an assassination attempt to kill him. Despite Plagueis' assumptions to the contrary, having mastered the Quetalca meditation, Maul could effectively hide his Force signature even while in close proximity to the Jedi Temple. Although his master Sidious possessed a much greater power in this ability, his was certainly noteworthy. He was able to use the mind trick, especially when working undercover, and once compelled a guard into committing suicide by having them blow up a bomb, killing himself and a large group of his fellow soldiers stationed at the mines on Morjon. His telepathy was so advanced that he could invade the mind of another to seek information, and was capable of using Force Sight to enhance his senses, as well as utilizing Battle Mind and Force Rage to increase his fighting force. Maul also demonstrated an immense resistance to Force Lightning, shrugging off a barrage unleashed by the Night Sister Miguela while hunting for Alex Garin, This ability was only effective to a point, however, as Darth Sidious, who possessed the second most powerful Force lightning in all of galactic history, was perfectly capable of torturing Maul with lightning. However, he showed immense resistance to Dooku's lightning, which was significantly weaker. Maul was skilled in combining Force talents with mechanics. In a secret facility on Coruscant, Maul constructed much of the gear and gadgets that he used on his missions, including his signature speeder bike Bloodfin and the Dark Eye Seeker droids. Using the Force skill Mechadilu, the Zabrak modified the protocol droid C-3PX into an assassin droid to guard his ship while he went out on various missions. Maul eventually learned a technique similar to one spell that was utilized by Darth Zana, a powerful Sith sorceress within the Rule of Two's early days. When he came across the bodyguard of Vigo Nalis, who came to read his mind in order to gain answers, the Zabrak unleashed the spell, with the Itochi expressing horror at seeing so much darkness that he collapsed, reduced to a silent, vegetative state. Maul was also capable of unleashing a powerful Force scream that he could control to a remarkable degree, as shown by how he barely managed to keep himself from letting out a roar after accidentally cutting himself in the barracks of the Orsis Academy. Almost 2 decades later, he let out a roar across the canyons moments after his reconstruction, and he also used Force Scream against Ventress and Kenobi numerous times throughout the Clone Wars. So, how powerful really is Darth Maul? If I was to put his scaling on from 1 to 10, with Darth Sidious and Master Yoda being 10, and number 1 likely being a Jedi Padawan, I would place him at a solid 8. For this verdict, let's say beings like Count Dooku are a 9, Darth Malgus is a high 8, and Darth Maul is a low 8. Darth Maul certainly was very powerful, with a wide range of abilities, including augmentation and Force Lightning. Force Lightning we never see him use, however it is confirmed as abilities that he has possession of in Legends. So, how powerful would he actually be? In a combat scenario, Darth Maul is definitely one of the best for his era, and in my personal opinion, he would rival and perhaps surpass overall the strength of Mara Jade Skywalker, Kyle Katarn, and perhaps Kip Duron, although I'm not so sure about Katarn and Kip, but I certainly believe he would be more than a match for Mara. Darth Maul was very powerful, and in his reborn form, I have no doubt he would be able to give Kara, Kip, and Mara a run for their money. So my friends, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one and have a wonderful day. And leave in the comment section who I should make a power breakdown on next.